an original MCM production.
And now, to our program, Jamie Reeve, Vice President, Wealth Strategies at Northern Trust, will introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. Real quick, our first question, is it the truth? Raise your hand if you went shopping yesterday on Cyber Monday. So we have about 7 of the 121 million Americans who participated and spent over $3 billion in our economy. And sort of along those lines, today we have Byron Franz from the FBI, who I have the pleasure of introducing. He's the chief cyber sleuth here in Milwaukee with the FBI. I learned today he's a native son, attended school in South Milwaukee and graduated from St. Francis High School. He earned his degrees from the University of Wisconsin, first a BA, a double degree in international studies and Russian, and then a law degree as well. He started his FBI career in Indianapolis and has been in Milwaukee now for about the last 10 years or so. And he's going to tell us all the great things he's doing to keep us and our business community safe from all those cyber sleuths. So please welcome Byron Franz.
Seriously, I very much appreciate this invitation. I very much appreciate that Jamie introduced me to you all, because the good works at the Rotary here at Milwaukee are far-reaching. I've seen them my entire life, and I'm grateful in some small way to try to give back at least 25 to 30 minutes of boredom to you in return. And quite honestly, I have to tell you, I prepared for an hour presentation. So we're going to push this. We're going to be moving along right now. So what I tell you is that America is the place where ideas come from. The unique concept that is the American experience that draws so many to our shores from every possible culture, to our academic institutions, to our businesses, many of the prime of which in the United States are based here in Wisconsin. And we have everything from Marinette Marine making littoral combat ships, Oshkosh Corporation, Epic Systems Corporation. We have the Cray supercomputers are built in Chippewa Falls. We have everything Johnson Controls, Rockwell Automation, the largest manufacturer of industrial control system engineering in the world. All these places are worth something, and other hands are trying to steal them from us. Unfortunately, chiefly they are foreign nations, constantly trying to get those nuggets of information that Americans have slaved and worked at to build something and take them away. These things are called trade secrets. And under federal law, a trade secret is anything that derives independent value by not being known to the public. Now, we're not talking about patents. Those are known out there about 18 months later. We're talking about, going back to my economics class from St. Francis, that comparative advantage, that nugget of capital wealth that you've determined is something of worth that you have to protect. You see, we in the FBI can enforce something called the Economic Espionage Act. We can go after these people for trying to steal, and perish the thought, actually stealing your trade secrets. But you're on the front line protecting your own jobs. You're responsible, which under the prongs that I enforce, under the law, reasonable measures have to be taken by the company to protect its own wealth. Reasonable measures. We're not talking about perfect. We're talking about reasonable. We're talking about locking the doors. We're talking about firewalls on your networks. We're talking about cameras in the ceilings if necessary. In all cases, confidentiality agreements and rules of ethics for your employees. All these things can add up to reasonable measures. Then we can go after the bad guys and gals. But until then, we can't do anything. Congress basically said if it's not worth enough to you to reasonably protect it, it ain't worth enough for us to go after them. So how are they trying to do that? Well, the chief means is probably cyber, stealing things. The other thing is insiders, people who have already been granted access to these trade secrets. And we've had at least 3 cases prosecuted in the great state of Wisconsin in the last 3 years. The first one was at the Medical College of Wisconsin. What was the attempted theft? C25, cancer-fighting drug. Then GE Healthcare, pretty significant component of our business community. MRI technology, that was the thing. 2.4 million files allegedly stolen. And then, ongoing case involving a Chinese company called Sinovel, which is accused of trying to get an insider at a company that used to be in Middleton, Wisconsin, called AMSC. In this case, it's wind turbine software. All these things of value, all of which have jobs. Some estimates put the drain of intellectual property from our country is going up to $400 billion a year, going to other people's books, helping other people's kids going to our colleges. And some estimates can put that $100 billion to $300 billion being taken by cyber espionage. And 90% of the problem is we ourselves. The biggest problem is when we click an attachment or link on an email. It's just as simple as that. It goes back to looking at the traditional vampire movies. I'm not talking about this Breaking Dawn nonsense that's come out recently. I'm talking about the traditional vampire movies where they have some English people from like England and Romania for whatever reason, and someone gets bitten. The next day they're scratching on the window saying, "Let me in." And in every case, they open the door and get bitten. That is how the attacks take place. They send something called a spearfish, a convincing email. They've looked at you, they've looked at your LinkedIn, they looked at your Facebook page and sent something that looks convincing to you. Maybe it's US Bank, that there's a dash in there in the wrong place. But we see what we want to see and we click what we see. And we click it and we let the vampires into our corporations. And too often, exfiltration takes place. That's where data, jobs are taken out of our economy. So the chief thing we have to worry about in many cases is cyber. This is the new world. And in the new world, I'm going to be flying through this hour-long presentation in just a few minutes. The way I look at cyber is this. This is what you'll see in many corporations. Companies such as Kaspersky Labs, FireEye, and in this case Norse, show real-time cyber attacks taking place. You are seeing a cyber missile flying out and too often hitting the United States with a flash of light. Just like a nuclear missile, a payload has been introduced, a flash of light happens, and there are casualties in an economic war. What are those casualties? U.S. jobs taken away because someone clicked on something they shouldn't have. And see, the problem is we as Americans, we are the best in the world at bleeding blood in the cause of freedom. We have bled, and many people in this room have served proudly our country. We understand a burning building, but unfortunately Americans have a problem with thinking anything is a threat that don't go boom. And things are going boom, but they're doing it very quietly. Cyber attacks are gutting our economy in many ways. And so when these flashes of light happen, you don't see a burning building if you looked at what happened. You see an empty building. And if you look closer, you see empty lives, because mom and dad can no longer support their children to go a step up in the next generation that we all hope to happen. But there's a ray of light. There's hope. The people like you in this room, us as community leaders, government people, can work together in partnerships to try to preserve our way of life and our intellectual property. And going through here, the chiefest people who go after our economy, taking our trade secrets, according to the U.S. intelligence community, are China and Russia. Does that mean that we should ignore other hostile foreign nations like Illinois? No. In all cases, we have to worry, we have to look south and worry. But the fact is, no nation has friends, only interests, as the foreign leader from France said in World War II. And I think it resounds true. Business is war is a Japanese axiom. As Clausewitz said, called diplomacy war by other means. And so that is how it's happening, an economic war upon our way of life, stealing secrets, gutting our economy from within. But we can do things about it. we can realize the threat does emanate from computer intrusion, taking our ideas quietly through network spaces.
If you look up and down this street of Manhattan, Wall Street's just around the corner, all the major banks, the stockbroking houses, have they been hacked already?
They've all been hacked. 80% of all American companies have already been hacked. And yet, most American companies spend more on their coffee budget than they do on protecting their IT systems.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Sure, they've all been hacked.
You get what you pay for. And honestly, the things I've heard about the Target breach, which many of us know about because we all got new Target cards, they were attacked apparently laterally by a trusted partner they had allowed access, a company that was their HVAC producer, Fazio Mechanical. They apparently were employing a free version of something called Malwarebytes. You get what you pay for. The free version just didn't cut it. So we got to think about this. Is your IT fortress safe? And if you say yes, you're deluding yourself. But that's a good place to start. We want to get to a point where we feel that we've done all we can. You'll never be perfectly safe. In every means in America, the walls will never be perfect. But the fact is, you have to realize that the IT fortress is different than a physical fortress. Unfortunately, at UW-Madison, I roomed with people who were mechanical and civil engineers. These friggin' people had jobs waiting for them after college. I moved back to my mother's house. But the fact is, despite this fact, these people would say that the load-bearing bricks in a physical fortress are more important than the others. That's true in a physical fortress, but not the IT one. No, the cyber fortress, every brick is important as another. Mortared together by a common purpose, producing an idea, producing a product, a service. And no brick is more important because these are your employees. And everyone who has a keyboard and access to the internet is one of these bricks, and you have to give them the love, the training they need to fight off these threats. You have to realize that in the IT fortress, there are no associates. There are only CEOs. In the IT fortress, there are no privates in this army. They're all generals, and they all better get the general's briefing. Because who am I going to attack? I can attack the CEO or the president, a process called whaling in the cyber world. But most likely, I'm going to get that person who didn't get the briefing, doesn't get paid as much, and who will click. So we have to make sure that we invest in our cyber bricks and understand they're advanced people, nation-state actors on the behalf of their corporations that won't be trying to hack us. These things are called advanced persistent threat actors. These are often state-supported, or hackers employing their service on behalf of state actors trying to get us. The company called FireEye, which one of the most preeminent cyber defense companies in the world, tracks 30 state-supported cyber actors, 28 of which they attribute to China, 2 from Russia. And consistently, China is attributed to at least 90%, if not more, of all trade secret theft cases that we investigate.
Advanced persistent threat is this term that came out of military and government circles to refer to extremely sophisticated attackers who launch targeted attacks against organizations in order to break into their computer networks and steal information. Certainly any organization that deals with sensitive information needs to be concerned about this level of threat. When we're talking about advanced persistent threat, usually the attacks start with reconnaissance. The bad guys will try to figure out as much information as they can about their target using public information sources. And then they'll start spearfishing. They'll send credible emails to key decision makers and people who have access to information that they want to steal. And those emails will often be very convincing and credible, and they'll entice the user to click on a link or open a file. And the consequence is that the bad guys end up taking control of a computer. And from there, they spread their control within a network.
And you can believe him because he does have long hair. These actors have names. There are many of them. You can see these. Energetic Bear, which is also called Crouching Yeti. This is believed to be the Russian Federation. And they're not bothering with intellectual property. They're apparently going after things we call SCADA. This is an acronym of great importance to every American. Supervisory control and data acquisition chips are what keep these lights on, that keep the water flowing. And their derivative industrial control system machinery, Rockwell, which is the biggest manufacturer of this. These people are trying to turn off the lights and turn off our factories, possibly, if they need to. And we can only imagine that nations may have this capability, as the NSA director said. He thinks that 2 states do. But imagine they're holding off for a rainy day, a war. What happens if Daesh or ISIS or ISIL gets a hold of that? Do you think they're going to wait for a rainy day? The day that a NICU unit and a bunch of preemies lose heat in their incubation tubes in a hospital is a day that America will wake up to the significance, possibly, of this threat. And there's others that are out there. You can talk about the Guardians of Peace. It was the North Koreans that almost brought Sony Entertainment to its knees, and others. And they have these people. Military Unit 61398. The U.S. government indicted 5 Chinese military officers, hackers working for their cyber army that we allege, and we watched them, stealing from U.S. corporations, stealing from companies like Alcoa and U.S. Steel and Solar World and a company called ATI. Allegheny Technologies. What significance would that have here? Well, as I said, I grew up in South Milwaukee. Over the border was our evil neighbor, Cudahy, or Cudahy as we called it. No offense to anyone from there. But I had to work at a Century Foods in Cudahy. And in Cudahy, we have great manufacturers. My Boy Scout troop, people worked over at Laddish. Well, their fathers did. And Laddish isn't called that anymore. It's called ATI Laddish. These folks in this screen stole almost every logon credential from the ATI infrastructure. Does that mean Cudahy, Wisconsin could be ground zero in a cyber war? Yeah, it kind of does.
Phishing is one of the several methods an attacker
This is how they
uses
usually
to steal
do it.
data from the general public. The attacker creates some basic bait, like a generic email with a malicious attachment, that installs some spyware and sends it to thousands of unsuspecting users, hoping at least some small percentage bites. Spearfishing is when the attacker focuses on a specific target, perhaps a highly privileged individual within an organization. This means that they must craft a convincing message that is tailored to the intended victim. The attacker carefully plans the strike, gathering data about the target, their social networks, and their online accounts, before meticulously tailoring the bait to the individual. Once the target falls for the bait, his credentials are captured, and the attacker secretly enters the network and installs a persistence mechanism, such as a remote access Trojan or RAT, to secure ongoing access to
And
the
what does a
system.
rat do?
Once my victim opens up that document, that secret computer code inside has started to run on his computer without him even knowing it. And it's connected back to my computer, to a program that I'm running called Nuclear Rat.
Stealthy programs like this allow for a shocking behind-the-lines invasion, where the attacker can spy or disrupt at will.
I can even take screenshots of his computer and watch all of his keystrokes via something called a keylogger. He's logging into his email right now, and I can actually get his username and his password. Not only that, but we can also get video by turning on the webcam, and I can actually see what my victim looks like, all without him knowing.
None of you should have a webcam that does not have a piece of black electrical tape on it. You can tell that to the former Miss Teen USA. She unwittingly clicked on one of these remote access Trojans, and she had the black shades rat on her computer. For a year, some man was watching her, recording her most intimate moments, and suddenly blackmailed her. She reported this, the guy was caught, but it doesn't change the fact that this woman was virtually raped. We all are in danger of such a virtual invasion of our privacy and the privacy of our family, and it takes so little in some cases to protect ourselves. A piece of plastic, a piece of electrical tape over something. So consider this, and consider the fact that when you click on something, I actually say that every high school should give a demonstration what a remote access Trojan does. Someone virtually is watching you doing your shutterfly with your kids. They're watching everything you're doing, and too often they are taking trade secrets away from us. How do they do it? Usually it's an attachment or link sent to you via email. First, as I am an attorney by background, I could say that you can look at filings and I could find out what that attorney is doing and who their co-counsels are. And then I can set up a domain of the firm that you're supposedly working with. And all I have to do is take a dash and change it a little bit and set up a new domain and send it to you from Doug. But it ain't Doug. It's a guy from China or a guy from Russia, and sent to you, and it's believable, it's credible, and you go through thousands of these a day, and you don't think. You're texting while you're driving, you shouldn't, but you're doing all this stuff, and you click, and you're owned. And it's usually an attachment or a link. Often it's a RAW or a zip file. And a barometer, either Verizon or FireEye actually said, when a spearfish attack is done, when someone sends these emails out, targeting your organization specifically, because a phishing expedition is general, dear customer. This one has your name on it specifically. When this is done out, when a spearfish is launched, the first person in your organization that clicks on it will take 1 minute and 22 seconds. That's the amount of time you have when it lands in the queue of your inboxes in your company. So what can you do? Well, you can realize that people like these Chinese actors, this guy was actually attacking people proposing as a CEO and sending something like an agenda for a stockholder meeting. These are the things that draw people to click, or something about your pay scale. Another thing you have to worry about is drive-by downloads or watering hole attacks. This is compromising websites that you know. Like, for instance, say I have XYZ oil company in a small community with a small chamber of commerce. If I can't attack the oil company, what do? Is I pollute the website of that chamber of commerce that may have a part-time student from college that set up the whole website, and nobody is policing it day in and day out. So I put malware on, and that local oil company, someone from there clicks on it, and then that's when it launches the attack. Well, what can we do? Well, the first thing we advocate is often that people actually attack their own companies with cyber attacks. You send your own spearfish emails and show how many problem children you have. And believe me, you probably have many. So when you send these out, or you can hire outside firms called penetration testers or white hat or ethical hackers. They're rattling your doors and your windows before the thief does. I think you'd rather have that done ahead of time. And you will learn over time, if you have 1 in 5 of people reporting this to your IT people, you can declare victory. You will never have 100%. You will always have that problem child where you put it on the thing, says, do not click on this. Western civilization will die. You will die. Your family will die. And they'll still click on it and go, what? You know, there's always going to be those people. And unfortunately, being the U.S. government, we got plenty of them. So the fact is, there are many different things that we can do. We can insulate ourselves. We can use intrusion detection systems. And you use them in layers. You don't rely on just one thing to protect yourself. That's the way the Russians stopped the Germans in the Battle of Kursk. They put like 200 miles of minefields. The Germans got through one and like, what, another? That's what hackers have to deal with. You have to realize there's other things like brute force attacks. This is where password security is the key. And believe me, these programs, they go on your login, they try millions of combinations at once. And in cryptography, the length of the password is important. If it says your character for your password is 8 to 12 characters, you should use 25. Believe me, and you should change it always often. But too often, we find our super password, and you're using it on your Yahoo, your Chase, your everything. And you got your one, it's Packers win, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and your first kid's name. And you're using, and if one of those gets compromised, these advanced attacks now take that, knowing you're reusing it, and they fire it off at everything else in your life. And they got one-stop shopping because you got one password. So I'd say if you're going to do anything, change it up a little bit. Put Yahoo Packers win, Google Packers win, Chase do something to trade it up so that the soulless program doesn't own your entire life. And we have to realize that small business owners have to realize about an attack called SQL injection. Sounds highfalutin, but it's a very important thing we should know about. Why? That SQL, the L stands for a machine language. And many companies use SQL as a means of, on their website, someone clicking on and ordering a good or a service. So you get that required thing with the asterisk saying your name, address, payment information. That's got to get from the website way over to the company so they can put the stuff on the conveyor belt so you can get that bench you ordered. Well, that's done not by magic. It's done by different means, many of which is by SQL. So what happens if that company doesn't police their website all the time? Patching it, having an IT professional policing it. If you have a part-timer or someone who's not doing it, bad guys can take advantage of vulnerabilities that you have not patched, and they click in, instead of your name, they put in SQL code, semicolon, dash, dash, semicolon, which means, translated, let me into your company. And too often, that's what happens. It's simple as that, and no one clicked on anything. So and then we have to remember about passwords. Passwords. And then we have to realize, I have to go through this really fast. There's another means that people can do. It's called Maltego, and it's also called Shodan. These are search engines that are available to people for a pay-per-view service. Shodan HQ has about 1.6 billion IP addresses. In every device, your laptop, every device hooked up to the internet is assigned an IP address. Shodan catalogs them and shows whether or not there's a security vulnerability in them. Hackers, we've actually put out a recent alert saying that hackers, suspected state-supported actors, were using Shodan and other things to find vulnerabilities in corporations and exploit them. So there are things you can do to find the open windows in your own company. Shodan HQ is one of them. Now, putting it all together, how would a hacker go about this? We talked about spearfishing, someone clicking on something. Here you're going to see someone clicking on something at the end of the day about his pay grade. That's a pretty enticing attack. Clicking on it, the hacker is woken up at his desk because when a compromise takes place, it's got a phone home. This is called beaconing. It's calling home saying, hey boss, I'm in the company. What do you want me to do? That's what takes place. Then they go in and they have to expand their access. What they want is what your IT administrators in your company have called an admin account. Most of us are users. An admin account is essentially, and I don't mean to be profane, is the God account of the network. They get that, they can own the company. So that's why very few people have these. These are the equivalent of the two people in the nuke silos with both keys. So they are trying to get that in the video I'm about to show you. Then they use SQL injection, they use brute force attacks, and at the end they get something called exfiltration. That's taking your company data, all your PII, PHI, and using it to monetize it.
We're in! We're in!
This is it. The criminals have broken through the defenses, combining a zero-day exploit with some social engineering to get the victim to open their malicious file. This computer is now under their control, and they can use this user account to begin exploring the network undetected. The hackers look for any information they can use to exploit the system and gain higher privileges to access further data. Here they find a login page to an HR database and attempt an SQL injection attack. It fails. They find an email from another user that seems to have access to important databases and target him. After dumping the local password cache, the attackers have domain admin credentials. They browse the network to find the machine belonging to the new target. They connect with the remote desktop to drop a backdoor for later use and access the local hard drives, searching them for sensitive data. Now it's time for the payoff: exfiltration. They return to the compromised machine and find their goal: credentials for a development database. A brute force attack against the server gets them root access, and they're free to dump the entire source code for a critical project. All they have to do now is bring it home.
Just like that.
And too often, in other languages other than English, they are saying just like that. When you saw that green bar, when it gets to the end, you can count on a bunch of jobs going along with it. So what can we do? Well, we can do what the Russians did, and they recently, their version of the Secret Service commissioned a whole bunch of typewriters, ribbon typewriters, tap, 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 shing, piece of paper, because they can't get hacked by nobody. $750 a piece to go retro. Can we afford to do that in an interconnected world where everyone has to have the iPhone 1 million and the Samsung Galaxy 1 billion? No. So what do we have to do? We have to be smarter than the competition. We have to have an intrusion defense plan. What are you going to do? It's just like a fire drill. Exactly that. What are you going to do? Do you have insurance for being hacked? Do you have a mitigation or other firm that's going to come in and clean up the mess? And we have to go on and on. We have to make sure that we have penetration testers to check our networks to make sure they're secure, and so on. And to go on, the biggest thing that I'm told by the head of security from SC Johnson, the CISO there, were two of the most commonly used programs that you use every day that are exploited are Java and Adobe, specifically Adobe Flash. A lot of things called zero-day exploits go through those. Patch those. If you're not going to disable them, patch those. But remember, at the end of the day, having credential management, having network segmentation, protecting those crown jewels is important. If you can't, and make sure your employees are trained about this threat. Remember, 90% of the threat is people clicking on stuff. And remember, passwords, passwords, passwords. And we'll go through here. I think I'm at the end of my short rope. And we should understand that when I talk about passwords, it can't be overlooked. And the best person to be talking about this as in cyber defense would be this man, Jimmy Kimmel.
We need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is password 123. And as long as that's the case, we're vulnerable. So today we sent a camera out on a Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's its name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where'd you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. Have you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. Mm-hmm. So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, nice. And what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. Mm-hmm. So Jolie, 6, 12, 95.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 468. And then Israel.
I'm sure Hamas attacked him right after he did this.
For me, it's strong enough.
Ireland, 1, 2, 3, 4. Gemma, 1, 2, 3. Spelled G-E-M-M-A.
Well, most of them are Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
like
so
what? Like what's a good Italian password?
My grandma's name.
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, now you know my password.
So I really appreciate the chance to talk to you today. If I had more time, I'd talk about the thing that's probably actually more important to you than all this, the smartphone. It ain't smart to call it a phone. It ain't been a phone in a long time. It's a computer that's used a little bit every so often to make calls. And we have to treat it like such. So I have a whole other part of my presentation, which you're bereft of, I'm sorry to say, which is going on this. And if I can leave anything about protecting this, is you have to worry about the man-in-the-middle attack. Not to be sexist, we'll call it women-in-middle attack. But the fact is, when you go over to use your Wi-Fi in someplace like Starbucks or a hotel, none of which are actually providing the Wi-Fi service. They've sold it to somebody else. You don't even know who's providing the Wi-Fi there. So you go over there and you're going on your browser and you're doing stuff. And Paris thought banking online using a public Wi-Fi hotspot. Why I say that is because people can bring a device into a place that looks like a laptop with a little antenna. And what they do is the Wi-Fi on your phone, there's a feature called Auto Connect. It chooses the alpha male in the room Wi-Fi and hooks into it. So the bad people, what they do is they put an alpha male above it. Now it's the beta male. They are the alpha male. Your phone now hooks up in the bad guy's system. So all the credentials, all the passwords, all the stuff you're going, all your IP are going in their device now. So that's something we have to worry about, and that's why we have to pay particular attention to protecting our iPhones and cell phones, each of which is Android is actually being attacked about 80% of the time. Why? Because most people are using them. Anyway, I really appreciate the time. Remember, the FBI is part of a partnership with the business and academic community. We're all in this together. The loss of IP, the loss to your firm and your organization is a loss to the national security of our great country. And that's why we're in there for you. We have an outreach called InfraGuard, which I can talk to you about, and another one called Strategic Partnerships, and we provide for free, well, it's not free, you paid for it with your tax dollars, speakers like myself to address your community and talk about these risks. And feel free to ask me about that. I'd be glad to come to your organization. I thank you for your time. I thank you for what the Rotary does to benefit the great city of Milwaukee, and I wish you all a great day and a great holidays.
An MCM production.